Hey, Russell. Nice of you to join the podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Russell, you're the president and CFO of Tropic. I never asked you how that came to be. I'm sure there's probably over beers. Yeah, would love to hear kind of like how it's going with the being president and CFO and how you're juggling it all.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the office of CFO is transforming anyway. There's a lot of articles about the COO role and the CFO role kind of intersecting. And so for us at Tropic, me being president just means I have my hands around the full customer journey, the revenue engine of the business, looking under every rock, pulling every lever. And I think if CFOs evolve that way, it's not only healthy for the business, it's healthy for their careers. And so as it pertains to Tropic, it was just a great opportunity for me and Tropic to lean in and use my skills. I've got the numbers skills, the analytical skills, but I also have lots of ideas about how the operation itself should function. So the combination of the roles just made sense, especially as Tropic is in our season of really accelerating and deploying some super cool stuff in the market.
Nice. I guess what has surprised you being president, like in taking on additional responsibilities? And it makes sense. I mean, your Tropic, looks at spend management. It's kind of top of mind for a lot of CFOs, controllers. I guess, yeah, what's been surprising about taking on additional responsibilities and having the president title?
Yeah, it's not that CFOs don't have to worry about company culture or messaging or inspiration or connecting the dots for people, but I feel like in a role, whether it's president or COO or anything beyond CFO, it's more important than ever to really harness those skills because you learn that people look to you to kind of set the pace, set the operating standard. What is our model of excellence? How are we achieving it? So I'm rolling out things like plans on a page. If you're
Okay.
familiar with those, essentially spelling out what the KPIs, I would say OKRs, but people misuse the phrase OKR for the pure sense of OKR, but basically the goals that we set to achieve as a business. So partnering with the founders on that. And we're still very much a founder-led business too. So there's a really healthy check and balance symbiotic relationship for a founder-led business to have an operating CFO slash president that can be really hands-on with the business. I think it's worked really well for us.
That's great. Pivoting a little bit, I know you're in the office of CFO and spreadsheets. I guess where do you see spreadsheets in the ecosystem with all the other tools and software that's out there? Where do you see it going? Where do you see it today? And this is probably a broader conversation as we sort of talk about AI as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we can go lots of places here. So I'll tell a brief story about 10 years of my career was with a company named the John H. Harlan Company, later became Harlan Clark, and then a piece of it became, I think, what is now Veracast. And we had different lines of business, all financial services related. We had a piece of the business that was software related. I worked in the printed products division, which was basically paper checks. Okay.
That's incredible.
And
That
this
the
was
business got totally demolished over time and just, yeah,
so
interesting.
what's fascinating about that is, I started working there, 1998, 99, give or take. And so 26 years ago, there was an article called The Indelible Check. And it was written far prior to me working there. And it was talking about the survivability and durability of the check because everybody was like saying checks are going to die, they're going out of style, people are going to stop using them. It is still like hundreds of millions of dollars a year market. So even, and of course, back then it was a multi-billion dollar market. So sure, it has had some downturns, but it still has its place. Well, what does that have to do with Excel? So think about Excel. I would say like stories of Excel's demise have been either exaggerated or just aren't true. Did you know? So here's some interesting facts for you.
Okay, I'm ready.
Did you know that Excel has 500 million paying users and
500
over
million, is that worldwide?
Yep. Yep, it's roughly the equivalent of Netflix plus Amazon Prime subscribers combined, which equates to like over a million, like 1.3 million companies in the US alone that are using Excel. Not only that, when you look at like if you just scan for LinkedIn job postings that are in the finance space, you can't find one that doesn't say I'm looking for someone that has strong Excel skills. So that's one piece of table stake. Another funny factoid. Did you know that there's actually an Excel World Championship in Las Vegas?
I did know that, and I do watch the YouTube videos,
It's on
which I don't know why I
ESPN.
do that, but I feel like it's kind of nerdy and corny, but
Yeah.
I love watching it.
Yeah. So you probably also know then Excel celebrated 40 years back in 2025. So it's had its 40th birthday. So I think it's still too young. It hasn't even hit midlife crisis yet, right? So Excel is here to stay. There's no reason it needs to go away, especially now that it can do things like integrate with Python and R and different AI platforms like Claude. And so I think, there's questions about we're going through what's called SaaS apocalypse. Have you heard?
I've heard, I've seen the market, I've seen the big dogs take a big hit on the stock price.
Yeah, over $1 trillion last week in market value. Of course, we know how the market works, right? It moves on emotion, supply and demand, macroeconomic cycles, there's ebb and flow, but like that's real money that went out of some people's accounts, at least their portfolios. And so what's happening here? I think about when the market was moving from on-prem to in the cloud, there was similar fear or resistance. Or before we started recording, I was talking about frothiness, right? I use
Yes.
the word frothy.
And I was like, what do you mean by that frothiness? I'm like trying to, but yeah, go ahead and explain.
Yeah, I mean, I love coffee. I'm a coffee guy and I like a latte. And you know how they make a good latte is they really froth the milk up, right? They steam it and it's all. In fact, if you get shorted, do you drink coffee?
Yes, I drink cappuccinos or just
Okay.
regular black coffee, but yeah, cappuccinos are my thing.
If you get shorted the top part, you feel slighted, right? You want that froth.
Especially for lattes because it's almost mostly milk.
It is. And so it's all about the froth. And if they put a cool design on the top of the froth, more points there. But so when I use the word frothy about the market, I'm kind of conjuring that mental picture of things are getting shook up at a very fast velocity right now. And that's causing fear and wobble and uncertainty. And people are starting to they're scrambling, they're making crazy decisions. And so the market is frothy. And that's happening for software. And people are pitting software or SaaS as if it's something different than AI. And I've spoken about this in other places. Like it's like the mandate is to trim your software budget, your cloud SaaS budget to fund your AI initiatives. And in the pure sense, I kind of understand if we're talking about pure play AI tools like Claude
Hmm.
or Chat GPT, I get it, right? But I think we're using this very loosely because, as you know, most software tools are beginning to employ AI.
Yeah, every tool will probably have AI in it eventually.
Right. Either it's AI wrapper, which is less value add, or it's AI native, which is much more value add. We would argue that Tropic is AI native. A ton of our features and functionality that we are providing and delivering at scale for customers is on the backs of a lot of agentic work, which is it's super cool and mind blowing how it does what it does, but it's AI driven. So I think about Tropic. Are we software or are we AI? And why is it heresy to say we're both? So this is happening and it's happening, but it's happening in your world too for any tool that touches Excel. If you are an FP&A tool, or if you're any type of tool that houses data, the first reaction is let's just do that in Chat GPT or Claude, right? But where does all that data end up landing? Even so, we're proudly an Abacum shop
Yep.
at
You told me
Tropic.
this before.
Yep, we use Abacum. It's our FP&A tool. And you know what? When we're talking to investors if we're talking to even internally sharing models, where do you know where it all ends up?
In Excel.
In
To
Excel.
export it into Excel. I mean, I had the same thing when we were using Anaplan when I worked at a big corporate 500. We would export the final reports. They would consolidate in Anaplan, but we would export particular P&Ls to Excel.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't view, and it's no surprise as CFO, I don't view Excel as a dinosaur. It's only 40. I'm older than that. Does that mean I'm really out of style and dinosaur? Don't answer that. But like, I think it's sort of like there's a time and place for every tool set. They can coexist, and there's a reason. There's a reason why Excel has durability, which is why I told the beginning story about the indelible check. Now, Excel will probably outlive paper checks. The point being that people always want to jump straight to like sky is falling, worst case scenario. But the stats I just gave you tell you it's a robust community. It's not going anywhere, and it doesn't need to. Because sometimes for proof of concept creation, fastest thing to do is to just build it in Excel. Even if you're using AI, you often build your initial model in Excel and say, here's what I'm trying to do. Make it better.
Exactly. And I think actually the AI tools have invigorated Excel in a way because you think about the underlying value in general AI inside of Excel, whether it's Claude or GPT or many of the other wrappers that are being built inside of Excel, it sort of makes that ecosystem even more relevant. I think there still is room for improvement. Of course, any technology that comes out, there's always going to be edge cases and things that it can't do yet. I kind of would like to ask, even around Claude, are you seeing any limitations on your side? I know you're using it every day, you post about it. What do you think about it today? And yeah, are there any limitations to what you're seeing?
So I am still a chat GPT user, but
Okay, why not fully convert?
I am not hiring it to do the same things that I was before. I feel like, and this is my unofficial, this is just my opinion. It feels more consumer based. If I want to send a family member a funny picture that's edited with AI that's celebrating like their birthday, like Chat GPT can do that way faster and better than at least the Claude models that I've used. Or even creating like content, curating content, visuals, presentations. It seems to have its really a solid spot there, and it's very fast. And even iterating on ideas and brainstorming. And the token consumption doesn't seem to be quite as aggressive as the Claude models are tuned. Well, fast forward to the past couple of weeks. I'm stepping into Claude, ramping up my use of it, and my mind was blown because it appears that their models are definitely tuned to the business, and I would probably even say to the mid-market and enterprise, like complex things that need to be solved. Because there's the Sonnet model and there's the Opus model. And Opus is for that really complex extended research thinking. But I quickly learned the hard way, like conversation limits are one of the biggest, most gigantic headaches in this entire process because you'll be right on the brink of something absolutely astonishing, amazing, and fun. And it'll be like, hey, we're done talking.
Because it went too far.
Well, every conversation has like a 200,000 token limit, or at least like the one that I'm in, whichever one I'm using. And it won't warn you unless you prompt it, hey, I want to be mindful of my token consumption. Prompt me before I consume them all. Let me know how many I have remaining in this conversation. You'll be right on the brink. And if you don't publish we can talk about like skills and the JSON files and the Python part of it, and whether you're publishing in JSX and converting to HTML and all these different tricks of the trade when you're creating dashboards with Claude. If you don't ratify and publish those so they're downloadable, they're gone. And do you know the chats can't see each other? They're not aware. Yeah, one conversation is not aware of another. So you have to start all the way. If you don't codify those files, save them into the project, ratify a skill. So, and I'm only 2 weeks in. So listeners may be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about, but give me some grace. Skill development is going to be the new thing that really takes teams' use of AI to the next level. Because a skill is basically a repeatable set of instructions and functions. And, in the software world, a skill would be like the very things that developers create that are componentized in an architecture that can be used in different parts of the application, like branding standards, data dictionaries, semantic layer detail, those kinds of things get codified. And so, yeah, I mean, that's my initial take on the
Do you
world
think,
of
I
AI.
mean, around that skills aspect of it, because every business is a bit different in the drivers, what you would ask it, what you're prompting, the context sort of window related to it. Do you think businesses in general, they see the efficiency, they see it, the potential to it, but do you think businesses are thinking about, all my data is now seeping into these large language models? And what does that mean when a competitor that's in my space is gleaning our forecast or gleaning how our subscriptions are growing? Like you're using it for instance, a forecast model. You're saying, hey, can you forecast out the next 2 or 3 years? And then a competitor asks about that. What do you think about sort of the data aspect? I know you mentioned there's a few context windows there. It kind of doesn't remember, but don't you think in the back end of these large language models, they're just sucking up all this data and they're using it and feeding it across other users eventually?
Yeah, so, well, there's what we're told and what is actually happening, and I can't represent what's actually happening. But what we're told is that the enterprise accounts, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude, the enterprise accounts do not allow data to be used for model training. They're
Do you believe
literally,
that?
go ahead.
Do you believe that? I mean, on its face, or do you think, I mean, ultimately to get better, you need the data. You need live customer data.
Do I believe that? I have to trust that because lots of companies are using it. And I think they would quickly be in trouble with a very large business model if it's found that they're commingling actual company confidential data that's on the enterprise plan. Now, if they're not on the enterprise plan, all bets are off. They don't make that promise. If you're just using ChatGPT or Claude, like the consumer version or the non-enterprise version, I don't think they make any promises about protecting your data. But for the enterprise plans, that's precisely what they do. And it's no different than our previous conversation about cloud versus on-prem. Previously, the fear, we had big data rooms with air conditioners, and you had the couple of IT people that they managed those mainframes or whatever the servers were, the server farm. And that was the only way to feel like we were protected, because otherwise, if that data was somewhere else in a building that wasn't ours, how could we ever trust they weren't just stealing our data? Fast forward to where we are today. You've got AWS. How many people are using AWS to store their data? And in the beginning of that process, did a lot of people say, well, how do we know AWS is not sharing our data with competitors? So I would say, I'm not trying to make the case for Anthropic, right? But what I'm saying is we have to trust that we've seen this act play out before. Now, do I think that they're looking at how questions are asked to train the LLM? Yes. That is not capturing our data. That's looking at how do humans interact with AI? What questions do they ask and how do they iterate? That is a different promise that they're not making. They're not saying, we don't pay attention to how you ask questions to better understand the words that a CFO might use to get the model to do what we need it to do. That's highly possible. But, commingling competitive data, let's hope not.
Yeah. So to all the viewers out there, buy the enterprise model and don't get caught
Absolutely.
with
Absolutely.
don't get
And because if when you're on enterprise, you have to authenticate through your like SSO through if you're on G Suite through that. And so it's like forcing users, and then the admin of the enterprise account can't even set it up wrong. They can't even set it up where they accidentally share the data. Like that's the point of the enterprise.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. When you kind of think about these tools, Claude, and then all these other LLMs that are out there, GPT will probably release something around Excel as well, get up to where Claude is. Where do you see it ending? Do you see a site? Like, what is the golden, when you think about adopting these tools and taking over maybe other, going back to our earlier part of the conversation about SaaS, eating SaaS, right? Eating other tools that are in your tech stack. What do you kind of see around Claude? Like, could it eat Acmum, or could it eat another tool that you have?
So let me reframe or let me tell you my philosophy on this. I believe that there's a workflow for financial things, data related things that we're talking about. And this isn't a perfect continuum, but it looks something like ingest, analyze, summarize, predict, recommend, nudge, and do.
Mm-hmm.
And on the data continuum, teams have been acclimating to the thought that there are tools, whether it's Excel or a fancy FP&A planning tool or anything, a data warehousing tool, ingest, analyze, summarize. Those are table stakes of those tools. And we accept that it's okay for them to be doing that work. And if there is a tool that's doing that 24/7, no one, now if you don't have tools doing that 24/7, then you have another problem. Prediction is the next level of the continuum, where a lot of people spend massive amounts of time trying to create a good Excel model that will enable prediction. In fact, really well-trained people making lots of money that really know all the complex formula. They know not to use VLOOKUP when index match is better. Is that like an Excel inside joke, or is that like
inside joke? No one's going to get it unless they know Excel.
it's an Excel inside joke? Or when people talk about visualizations, that it's tried and true, known, there's never a reason to use a pie chart. There's always a better visualization option than a pie chart. So when we move to predict, we're handing the keys over a little bit more to those agentic models, but prediction doesn't immediately mean something happens. Recommend, okay, if we don't pressure test and know the guardrails of this agentic model, and we just take at face value the recommendation, now the risk level's going up. Nudge, when I say nudge, I mean that the AI or the tool has actually gone through all of those other steps that I mentioned, and it's actually telling you this is what you need to do, or I am about to do this. Click here to approve. Let's say it has drafted an email that it thinks you need to send to someone with certain verbiage based on all the other signals of the ingestion, analysis, summarization, prediction, right? And then you click send, right? But you didn't notice that it got something wrong. But it's the do. So do I think that AI is going to eat all of that? I think that for the House of Finance, the nudge and do would be the last mile to go. And I don't see in the near future any CFO being okay with posting journal entries and closing the books purely agentic.
Yeah.
We see, right?
Yeah, I would feel uncomfortable if I was a CFO and just say, hey, everything's automated. Invoices come in, accruals are made, journal entries are made on Workday 5, and I'm just going to look at my P&L at the end of the day and say it's
Right.
okay.
Yeah. And so, but I think this is where it's back to the point of Excel's here to stay and it doesn't need to go away. It's also the case that like AI is here and it's okay to embrace it. And it's okay if it dramatically automates and simplifies things that were previously really clunky, like error checking, variance analysis, ingestion of the data, normalization, when you create those skills and they're repeatable. And so when you think about it, that's exactly the kinds of things that we're doing in Tropic with our data. We've tuned our model to be an expert at ingesting software contracts and the metadata from those contracts and identifying signals and preparing the price benchmarks and all of these things. And so there's not a hesitation to use it for that. But the minute that we're going to go and actually trigger something, that's when it's like, okay, let's have the human intervene, look at this, see if it's right, ratify it, edit it, change it. And that's also as you're building things either in Excel or AI or both. We talked about how it's not one or the other. If you're agentically building things in AI, in Excel, it's still an iterative process. And you would do that with an analyst too. Hey, this looks good. You got this wrong. Redefine this formula. How are you using this word?
So in that process of auditing what the AI did, what is the typical when you're looking at it, just going down to even the nitty gritty, putting together a forecast model? Like, are you just looking at it for sanity check? Are you kind of going into the cells to look at formula? I mean, I've seen the Claude, the latest one that they pushed out. The links work for the most part. The formulas are correctly picking up the right cells and the range, and it looks like it's pretty much there. But to get to that 100%, what do you think, you're doing or, your team's doing to ensure that, okay, if we're going to leverage Claude or another generative AI in Excite, except, I guess, what does that look like? What do you expect them to do? What do you think they should do?
Yeah. The human judgment part is super important. I've been building all kinds of views and dashboards and tools, and one of them recently was a cash forecasting tool. And through various iterations, as I'm looking at it, I noticed that, here we are towards the end of the month, but the month's not complete. But it was treating it as if the month was in flight and none of what had happened on the cash side had happened yet. So it was overstating some things and understating other things. Well, you would think, well, shouldn't AI be able to catch that? But remember, it's pretty literal. It's only as good as the guardrails you give it, the context you give it, the data you feed it, the skills that you're conjuring up and asking it to repeat. Like it can catch every single thing under the sun if you tell it to. When I let it know that it treated February as a full completed month, but it's in flight, the response was like, "Great catch, you're absolutely right." So that's what we would do if we had an analyst working for us and we were reviewing the file that they created and they made the same mistake. The difference now is this analyst is available 24/7 on demand, and you can run cycles through it much faster than you would a live human. So does that mean entry level financial analysts are going away? No. It means they need to learn to use these agentic tools now more than ever, because it's like we all have to up level our skills because the
Yeah.
game has changed.
No, 100%. Now, do you think the manager's role needs to be upgraded as well, just because it needs to understand what the AI is producing and what are the guardrails? They have to now become more of a quality assurance or an auditor of that work. And that changes the lens a little bit of what managers are there. Usually they're there to teach an analyst, these are best practices. This is what you need to look for. This is how you upskill on analyses. I guess, how do you see that evolving?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, if we just stay within the world of we're building models in Excel, the role of the manager has always been to review and give feedback and recommend different ideas or vectors or spot the errors. And so the risk would be that if more people are using AI and you don't have full context and the speed is faster, you may not catch some errors that in the past wouldn't be made because they were obvious things that an analyst wouldn't do, like use a partial month as a full month, perhaps. So I think it means, in a weird way, the manager review cycles, they will have to up level their ability to spot those issues and know when employees have simply used AI to produce something that may have, ironically, it may have more errors initially. I mean, ideally it will have less, but it's a bit untrained and unfettered. Like everybody's scrambling after this to just use the tools, but few companies are doing it with a concerted effort with someone that's actually in charge of the AI strategy for the business. That's like a bigger company type of thing. There could be emerging innovative companies that have it at smaller companies, but I would say that's a very emerging role. and that it will take a special person that has the combination of technical skills and operational skills to be fully effective at it. So in the meantime, managers will have to change their skill set.
So this opens up kind of a question or an opportunity potentially. Is there an AI that reviews the AI?
Yeah,
Like, could
no.
there be a world that has that, which I think is super interesting. That kind of goes more to this agentic, agents talking to each other, MCP servers talking to data, and they know what they're putting together, they know what they're generating as analyses, but then someone else can come in or an agent can come in and just review it. So maybe less human in the loop and more of an agent that just reviews to make sure things are done correctly.
Yeah. So there's um, another bit of a story. There's a company out there called Safe Breach, which is a breach simulation and detection company, which is super cool. So they can run different scenarios on a company's infrastructure and data set and simulate where your vulnerabilities are, which to me just, I mean, doesn't that sound cool?
I mean, yeah, it's kind of like looks at your blind spots and be like, "Yup, you're not sufficient here. You need to do." And you're never looking at that type of stuff typically.
So there are already productized versions of doing that kind of thing, like looking at, okay, what are we missing? So imagine I mentioned the word skills, and this is going to be a new term that a lot of people start using, that skills are like a repeatable set of things you're asking, in this case, Claude to do or know. Well, I'll give you a real life example. Do you know what Moji Bake is? Okay. So I'm not a software developer, right? I don't have no idea what I'm doing trying to do these things. But I know one thing is if you have a JSX file and a giant JSON package of data, and you can't just email that to somebody because they don't have like a program by default to launch a JSX. They need it like in HTML. So you have to convert the JSX to HTML, and then it's more portable and they can view it. So in that process, there's strange things that can happen with UTF codes and different characters that are used when it's doing that conversion. And it can misinterpret this because emojis are strange combinations of characters, right? They're not actually stored as pictures. They're stored as like 2, 3, 4, 8 character, just gobbledygook is what it
Yeah,
looks
it's
like.
just their own language.
It's its own language. Moji Bake is when you're visualizing and suddenly rather than all the cool widgets and pictures and emojis, you're getting this like what looks like alien language. And it happens in the transformation and compilation process. Again, I'm a CFO. I'm not a developer. No idea what I'm talking about, but I know Moji Bake is a real thing. So I've tried to build a skill that's repeatable that anytime I'm doing a conversion of JSX to HTML, I invoke my Moji Bake eradication skill and I ask it to invoke that skill every single time. Well, you could create that for security standards, branding standards, data normalization, data terminology, formulas. Think of all the different ways you could do that. And then what you would really have is exactly what you're saying, agents monitoring agents.
Yeah. And that's sort of, I go back to where the world is today around AI being inside spreadsheets, is that there's no differentiation if you're using Copilot or Claude or any of these things. It all is represented by your work. Like at the end product, there's no, this was created by Claude. You don't know. The end user doesn't necessarily know that it was enhanced or created or generated by AI. And I guess the question that I have is, the audibility of it, what did the human touch versus what did the agent do? And
Right.
and this kind of goes back to rationalizing as a CFO or manager, saying, what are the pieces that my team's actually putting together? How are they shining up the end product? Was the end product was it certain parts of the model because it was created by a certain prompt? And because at the end of the day, the questions that you typically get from CFOs, like, where did this number come from?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's
And you'll
always the
quickly,
case. Like, where did it come from? Why is it like this?
and if AI built it and they don't understand it, you'll quickly figure that out because they'll be like, I don't know.
And
So
that's
I
the
think,
worst position you want to be in.
yeah, so I think, the ability to have the paper trail, the audit log, or just keeping track of the changes over time is if we're moving faster than ever because of AI. So in the old way, you would go to the analyst, you may have 10 things you want to change about a model. You email it to them, you Slack it to them. You may even put it in the cell comments. There's lots of ways you could do it. They work, maybe a day or two later, they email back or they whatever. Okay, I made the changes. And then there's the process as the manager of being like, what are all the things I asked them to do and where are they and how do I quickly validate that that happened? So you can't short circuit that cycle. But AI could make that, in many ways, it could make it much better, but it could also exacerbate the issue because it will take you down paths you didn't even intend. So you could ask for 10 changes and they could come back and give you a file with 15 changes because AI recommended some stuff they thought was cool. They made the change or they may have not even paid attention that because it will just decide to do stuff. If you ask a question in a certain way, it'll be like, okay, you're like, if you tell it a data point looks suspicious, what you really want it to do is evaluate why that data point is wrong. Is the formula wrong? Is the source data wrong? Is the transformation logic wrong? Sometimes it may just say, if you watch carefully the script, what it's doing like super fast, it'll be like deciphering what user has requested, determining that field is invalid, deciding to eliminate field from logic. Like that's not literally what it says, but that's my stupid translation. And so I have found times where I'm like, wait, what did you do? Why'd you get rid of that field? No, I need that field. You got rid of that field. And you're like fighting with it. Put the field back.
Yeah.
So, right, in an Excel model that's you're using now AI and you've got all these iterations, the ability to keep track of all the changes in a way you can consume is going to be heightened and more important than ever so that you don't screw things up.
Yeah, and I think with that too, it's kind of comes back to the background. You kind of need this. Again, you just said the limitations earlier, the context of where the stuff was coming from and the end product around AI. I think the evolution of it, or at least for AI to review another AI, is really to be where is this data coming from? How is it creating it? What is the assumption? Why is the assumption like this? And where's the data feeding from? Is it like going to this predictive component that you were talking about? Okay, that predictive component, every CFO is going to want to know, like, why is next year, why do you expect it to go up 50%? Like, that's going to be an obvious question. I think tracking, the changes over time and understanding that it's building upon your history, your business history. It's looking at your revenue, it's looking at your expenses, and it's coming up with something that makes sense. But I think you need the reasoning and assumptions behind it.
I have a real fear that for all the ways that AI is making us faster and more efficient and removing hassle and headache and spinning up super cool stuff, there is the risk that it makes us dumber or lazier.
Lazier, I can see that.
Because, and why I say dumber is part of how you grow up through the ranks of the finance world is getting your hands dirty in the trenches, building the models, struggling with the formulas, realizing how everything interacts, how this feeds this, the upstream impact, the downstream impact. If you're just hands off letting AI do a lot of that, and then your manager asks you questions, you're like, I don't, that's what I mean by making us at least lazier and short circuiting that learning cycle. And so I think we need to make sure that we don't replace that. Like there still needs to be an opportunity to, and for all the ways that you'll learn new skills, you also have to do the blocking and tackling and keep track of all the fundamentals. You mentioned data. Data quality is a great example. People ask, because Tropic, one of our durable moats is that we've negotiated $18 billion of spend for customers. That's live negotiations, humans, hands-on, talking to suppliers, negotiating with them, figuring out what levers work, what doesn't, what all the market trends are. If you just went out to AI and you said, I'm paying this for Slack, am I getting a good price? You don't know what it's basing that data on. It could be just going to a Reddit post that somebody dropped. It could be going to data that's years old. It could be going to a company that's not your size. There are myriad ways that it could fail you. And that's why we would say it's so important to understand that there are tools built for purpose, like Tropic, with the right data mode and context, with the skills built in, like to eliminate everything that we're talking about. And so people have to avoid thinking like that AI in and of itself is the end all be all. Just like, well, I have AI now, I don't need spreadsheets. Well, no, you do. You
Yeah.
do. You've got to figure out, how do I use AI to force multiply what I can do in the spreadsheet? That's the question.
Yeah. No, I think that's the right framework to look at it instead of saying this is going to replace 5 junior analysts on my team. That, first of all, that doesn't build up your ranks. It doesn't allow for folks to backfill your managers eventually over time. You're also not learning the basic things you learn when you're an analyst. And I do think it's upskilling for sure. How do these technology work? How do we leverage it to the best of our ability? But fully automating it or agentic wise. And I think my next question to you is this agentic, it's a phrase that's used. I think about it more of just about automating when, 5, 10 years ago, it was about using bots and machine learning and cleaning up the data. And it was more of a data science sort of exercise that you have structured data, it's all clean. Once you do that, you can kind of create these step-by-step things or automated bots that kind of go through. And that's kind of like essentially how I think about autonomous work in a way, but agentic is really kind of taking it to the next level. What do you see with that? And how do you, in your mind, how do you define agentic work?
What makes something agentic? Yeah. Or how do we, when we use the word agent, what do we even really mean?
Exactly. Because it's tossed around pretty like lackadaisical.
Yep. So we have at Tropic, we have one called Purchase Prep Assistant. One could argue that's an agent, but really behind the scenes, it's like numerous agents. Because Purchase Prep Assistant is giving like a singular view of everything I need to know about that individual purchase, to include where I can save money, the results of the Pulse survey, red, yellow, green areas of opportunity from a compliance check perspective, what the status is of who's approved, who hasn't, like all these different things. Each of those is its own agent. So the agentic part of it is, the old way would be each of those workflows and work streams were sitting in a monolithic system, and I could go in and click and see the status. And maybe there's a reporting engine and I can click the report and I can run different filters, but the compliance report is over here, whereas the benchmarking report is over here. You get the picture. Whereas the agent is getting the signals, going out there, getting the signals, and then pushing to me, here's what you need to know. So there's automation, like you said, and there's also summarization. It's sort of ingestion, analysis, summary. Remember my continuum? An agent is traversing that continuum. And some agents will go all the way to the do part of the continuum. But I think it's an agent if it's taking a task and automating it in some capacity at the lowest. I mean, I don't know if you Googled it what the definition would be, but that's my definition. It's automating something. Now, 25 years ago, we would use things called stored procedures.
Hmm.
A stored procedure was just like a table of SQL commands that you would ask it to run in sequence, and you would invoke the stored procedure, and it would go and it would, select from where it would run that SQL command on that data set. Was that an agent? Not really, not in the sense of how we're using agent now. So I think what you're calling out is the language is confusing these days about what is truly agentic versus just automation.
Yeah, no, I like to think about that type of because when you talk to a lot of CFOs, I think they have maybe mischaracterization of what that ultimately means. I think what they want at the end goal is automation. They want to save time, they want to save money and costs. And interestingly enough, some of the agentic things that, happen in 2025, and you see the reports at the enterprise level that some of those investments didn't pan out the way CFOs expected. And I think that was more of looking at it from a bottom line, saying, we're going to delay hiring or we're not going to hire these folks. We're going to invest millions or hundreds of millions of dollars into AI agents, agentic workflow, whatever you want to call it. And at the end of the day, when we go to report, we're going to be saving, X amount of dollars, and it's going to hit our bottom line. And it's going to be great. That hasn't necessarily panned out, at least from what I read on the mainstream media wise. I guess, how are you thinking about that? Is it just a matter of maturity, catching up, or people just overhyping the value of these products, replacing jobs or augmenting them?
Yeah, I like to speak about AI in context, in that to me, the most powerful and effective AI is when it's used in context. So if I'm an accountant and I have to go through a monthly close process, which includes automating various journal entry transactions, or at least pulling together the material for them, identifying the variances, basically just all the moving parts of the close. That would be, and I can leverage AI in doing that. That would be AI in context that serves a definite purpose. I think where we run into trouble is we're just like, everybody's doing AI. We better do AI. Go invest a lot of money in AI. And we're like, what do we really mean? What do we need AI to do? What problems does it need to solve? And where is it best suited to solve those problems? The capabilities are getting better at an astonishingly fast pace, but I think it's a little bit of both. I think, this may be a counter argument, but I think in many ways it is delivering more value sometimes than companies have self-actualized, because it's freeing up people's time in a concrete, tangible way. The company just doesn't feel the benefit of that because it may be giving the employee a better work-life balance,
Hmm.
which is, I mean, that's great, but
Yeah,
maybe
no,
the
I think it is great.
right, but the company may not see that immediately in the bottom line. It will eventually with retention rates and productivity rates, but in the near term, everyone's still trying to figure out what's the best way to do it in the context of my job. How do I use these tools? What are the best practices? And so it's sort of like in the early days of the iPhone, if people were like, well, that's just going to be a huge distraction. Everybody's going to be at work, busy on their phones, not paying attention to their jobs. But now we would say, well, your job follows you wherever you go with, you got Slack on your phone, you can access the G Drive on your phone, like corporate email. So I think it's similar. It's like we have to change how we work to fully realize the benefits of AI. And in the near term, you're going to see sloppy spending. And really, that's its own topic of conversation. Just pricing transparency with AI. Like, how many credits am I using? And what is a credit cost? All of that is just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and
Like,
it
am I
changes
going
too. It
yeah,
definitely changes quarter over quarter, and you're like, okay, I locked in a price 2 quarters ago, but now it's gone down or gone up, and so I think that also plays into, yeah, some of the what ROI sort of CFOs always look at. It's like we have to justify the spend, so how does that actually actualize down to the level that I can understand?
I think what we can't do is wait or do nothing. Often fintech has been kind of notoriously slower to move, and we don't get the same level of investment that like G&A in general doesn't get the same investment as sales and marketing or R&D. Let's just face it. And a lot of the things that CFOs are starting to be like so enamored by, people in R&D are like, we've been using Claude to do that stuff for 2 years, right? For them, but like they're developers. So what we're doing is we are Many companies don't have large development teams for the back office. They dedicate their development team towards building the product. If they're a software company, if they're a product company of that sort. So there's a scarcity of those developer resources to make tools internally work better. So every function finds themselves clamoring for tools to work better for them. And so with AI, they have the ability to spin up their own set of tools, but that could create what I call Frankenstack.
Rank and stack.
Yep, you heard it here first. Frankenstack, which would be like, Frankenstein, right? That would be like a tech stack that is some combination of monolithic, traditional SaaS tools, some combination of AI native tools, and then the scary unseen combination of agentic tools that each person has spun up on their own system, doing who knows what, connecting to who knows what. We now have a whole new world of security considerations, operational normalization standard considerate. The world is our oyster, but it's going to change how we work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Looking ahead, maybe the next 3 to 5 years, how do you see the CFO role evolving with AI being a technology that, right now it seems like it's going to change the way teams are structured. It could even change the way processes are done. Some may be automated. Some of the roles may have different skill sets. You're hiring differently. The types of backgrounds of folks, traditionally it's been EY, ex-auditors, right? Or folks that kind of came in from just going straight to FP&A. Some folks come in from consulting. Some are ex-iBankers. I guess, how do you see, the world of the CFO changing, even the role itself? Do you think it's going to be more a technologist?
Well, I think it's inescapable that the CFO and every other C-suite role will have to embrace technology as we have in the past. But I think you've seen this trend where people are hiring for operating CFOs to be the strategic advisor to the CEO, to unlock growth, to be a catalyst in the business. I like to call it chief alignment officer. And the issue is it's ever elusive. I would argue, I would take the position that the most difficult C-suite role, especially in this market, is the CFO. And I could make a great argument as to why, but the audience here would probably be like, we agree. Well, it's now even harder than ever because of data proliferating all over the place, connecting in who knows how many ways, what's the source of truth, what's the system of record. So there's an opportunity for CFOs to lead the way and truly become the strategic advisor, chief alignment officer, right hand, seat at the table type of leader that we all aspire to be anyway. I think this is just going to give us the platform to really take that mantle and run with it.
Yeah, I think this kind of that makes a lot of sense to me. It's really going to be someone that is the key right-hand person of the CEO, president, leading the business, but also being the operational alignment. Looking at it from a technology perspective, looking at it from a business, a finance, back office, how do all those things tie in together to ultimately grow the company and get to the next milestone?
Yeah.
So I asked these last couple questions. Don't kill me for it, but in your role, and what you've seen, what is the most overrated finance tool or software segment on the market now?
It's interesting because I would say that the notion of democratized planning and budgeting tools is very elusive. So I tried to stand those up and roll them out at companies, and it has to be the right size company. People buy them with these dreams of budget owners owning their budget and managing it in the tool. And it actually takes a very large, mature company to do that. And there are companies out there that can. But in the SMB and the mid-market space, budget owners aren't going to be in a budget tool doing things. I know that may sound like heresy to the budget tools out there, but nor do they need to necessarily. Because I think now the tools are easier to use. And so what you have is an FP&A resource with the power of tools like that, they can do what it used to take the democratization of a cast of thousands to do. So I don't know if that means the tool is overrated as much as misunderstood the best way to actually optimize it. You're probably not going to have budget owners in a tool unless you're a global multi-billion dollar company.
Yeah,
That'd be
I think you're right. It's under rating softwares that you or over your expectation is much higher. I think you're right. The larger organizations, institutions out there just have the more of authority or more of a strategy that they can push down and say everyone's using this. I know Google has, even within G Suite, they have their own budget tool that they don't offer to
yeah,
anyone else. It's
yeah.
just internal to the finance and accounting department in Google and how everyone does their budgets. Like every drive in each sheet says how many dollars they have left without even opening up the Google sheet.
The tool. Yeah, in my first CFO seat, I hired a tool to do democratized annual planning. And we hired it, we stood it up, we were excited about it. And I remember sitting in the executive team meeting, and the COO said, Russell, I'm sorry, but if you think my people are going to take time and be in a budget tool, you're wrong. Your team is going to key stuff into the budget tool. And I remember being like, sacrilege, but like you can't fight. It's like, okay, so that's why I picked that category. That's a dicey category. The tools are getting better and better though, by the way. So, but that's a super tricky category to play in.
It's super tricky as well. And I remember when I was at S&P, we had Bain or McKinsey or whatever, one of those large consulting companies come in and say, the finance organization needs to essentially FP&A say it needs to be in the business and business folks need to be the FP&A folks. And I remember my CFO saying, no one even wants to give us their forecasts on a monthly basis. How are we going to get one person in IT and product and sales and so on and so forth to be the FP&A person? Like, no, you need a dedicated human person to sit there and chase people down.
Yeah, it's not a hobby or a side job. And you need that autonomy, right? If they're embedded within the organization, then there's almost this default bias to set a budget that may be not stretching the org as much as it needs to. You need that autonomy of a dedicated person that's in finance.
Yeah, exactly. Last question. Any book recommendations, things you've come across where you feel like our viewers would appreciate it and say, wow, I took something away from that?
It's hard to find time to read books, but I think it's a content game. And if you're not listening to CJ's Mostly Metrics podcast or consuming his content, I highly recommend it. It is some of the best collection of leaders that he's bringing together, benchmark reports. So Mostly Metrics. It's not a book, but he's pretty much produced enough content that there'd be multiple books.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has time for books these days. It's all podcasts and
Yeah,
looking at
Mostly
content.
Metrics podcast. And then he's also on one with Kyle Poyar, which is Mostly Growth. They're both
Okay.
good.
I have to
Both good.
check them out myself.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Russell. I really appreciate your time.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me on.